When you visit Arizona, time is measured in moments, not minutes. Like the moment your work stress disappears as you kayak through the canyons. Or the moment you discover the life-changing effects of prickly pear chocolate. But nothing beats the moment you see the Grand Canyon for the very first time. Visit a new state of mind. Learn more at hereyouareaz.com.
Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly McLemore.
All right, good evening and welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly McLemore, CEO and founder of the Women's Small Business Initiative and an award-winning author. Welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have special guest Maureen Metcalf. Maureen Metcalf is the founder, CEO, and board chair of the Innovative Leadership Institute, is a highly sought-after expert in anticipating and leveraging future business trends to transform organizations. She has captured her 30 years of experience and success in an award-winning series of books that are used by public, private, and academic organizations to align company-wide strategies, systems, and culture with innovative leadership techniques. As a permanent change agent, Ms. Metcalf has set strategic direction and then transformed her client organizations to deliver significant business results, such as increased profitability, cycle time reduction, improved quality, and increased employee effectiveness. She and the Innovative Leadership Institute have developed and certified hundreds of leaders who amplify their organization's impact across the world. The Innovative Leadership Institute has a 20-year track record of delivering value to high-performing clients ranging from local Ohio small businesses to Fortune 15 organizations to the U.S. Armed Forces. Client industry mainstays include technology, engineering, manufacturing, financial, and medical services. The Innovative Leadership Institute also has an international presence helping companies in the United Kingdom and Europe. So without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform, Ms. Maureen Metcalf. Good afternoon, or should I say good evening? How are you?
Good evening. How are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for coming on to my platform. I am so excited to learn more about you and learn all about the business, and I'm sure the listeners cannot wait to hear more. So, Maureen, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners just a little bit more about who Maureen Metcalf really is?
Oh, goodness. After that long bio, first, Kimberly, thank you for having me on your podcast, and thank you for creating a podcast for successful women and entrepreneurs who are looking at expanding what and how they do their work.
You're welcome, and thank you.
You're welcome. So, about me, every time I'm asked this question, I probably give a different answer. I started my business 20 years ago. And I did that when I was working for a large consulting firm and my industry was dramatically impacted. So think back to 2001, around the September timeframe and what was happening. And I think that's relevant now because a lot of people are being impacted by the COVID pandemic. Yeah. It wasn't anticipated. Many of us see our organizations take a turn out of our control, and we have to figure out quickly how to pivot and continue to support ourselves, our families, and do meaningful work in our communities. And so that was when I started my business, was a pivot, unexpected, and I started it just as something to do between kind of recovering from an intense consulting career and giving me a time to breathe and figure out what next. And I learned that for me, running the business was what next. It wasn't just a transition.
Wow. And it's funny how, like we were talking, you were saying about the pandemic, and then of course 2001, there was another reason for you to have to even go that direction of pivoting that you weren't prepared to do. But it's amazing how we as individuals, when we need to, we get pushed up against the wall. We start doing things and thinking differently than we would have ever even considered doing. And so since we're kind of on that track of talking about 2020, talk a little bit about how 2020 affected you, and then how it has affected some of your clientele as well, and what you have done for them to help them kind of get out of that rut if they thought they were in a rut.
So many of them were in a rut, and the rut ranged from how do I deal with sending part of my team home. So I think everyone had somebody work from home: administrative staff, sales staff, front office, back office. Some organizations sent everyone home, and just navigating. And interestingly, for me as a consultant, I've worked, even when I was employed by a large firm, we were in client offices. So we were rarely sitting in an office that was our company's office. We were always out. So for me, for over 25 years, I've had the expectation that I can work away from the quote client, from my home office, home company office. It's been interesting to watch leaders who thought that no way could their employees work away from the office. They needed to be there. They needed to be interacting. And the longer we were away, the better we got at navigating and creating a new sense of interacting. So while probably most of us do not love being on Zoom for 8 or 10 hours a day, I think most people are finding the path forward to be productive using these tools. And in fact, I recently interviewed someone who has written a book on digital body language, and the idea that many companies will allow some percentage of their workforce to work from home, hybrid, part-time, or full-time. And in that new environment, we just have to hone our ability to work remotely like we did honing our ability to work in offices versus community farms and pre-industrial revolution. We didn't think that we'd send everyone to a building to work during specific hours. People worked at a different cadence. This will again be a different cadence and different skills. It's an evolution of how we work, I think. And so my clients are navigating all of the both opportunities and challenges that came with, parents having their kids at home. So how do we navigate the additional stress? We've rethought in many cases, how do we get the work done? We're rethinking, what does safety look like? And because my focus is leadership, we're really also rethinking, how do leaders who do they need to be and how do they need to be? And then what do they need to do to be effective? Because I think people who were successful pre-pandemic, some of them were not as successful during the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. But I guess my concern has always been, why do you feel that the leadership in these organizations had such a huge time just pushing up everything against the wall, saying, no, we want everybody in, we want you on site. We want you working here so we can see you. And I always think that's such an interesting fact, because even for me, because I still work full time, even though I have a business, I always used to hear, well, we got to see what you're doing. Well, you got people who are running around for 8-10 hour day, and they're more or less literally running around versus actually getting any work done. What do you think the hesitancy was about all of that?
My employees who were effective working in the office mostly are going to be effective working at home. And now I realize there are preferences, but really hardworking, dedicated people will find a way, whether it is their preference or not. And if you need to watch somebody work, either they're not a dedicated employee who has all the tools they need, right? We need to account for that. We haven't equipped them with skills and tools and those things. But assuming they've got what they need, and you have to sit and watch them, either they're not good or you're not good. And that's way oversimplifying. I realize that. But the folks who I trust on my team, I rarely see them, and they get phenomenal work done. I don't have to watch them do their jobs. Right. They're good at their jobs without me. That's why I hired them.
Exactly. Key word. I was waiting to hear that, because I always try to grasp that attitude. It's like, well, why did you hire all of us if you're so worried about micromanaging everything that everybody does? There's a reason why these people are in the positions they're in. So what is the huge hesitation about whether you're in here on site or you're not on site?
I think a lot of leaders discovered during the year, right? When we thought it was going to be a couple of weeks, it was a different mindset. But over the year, I've heard a lot of leaders say, boy, I didn't think this was going to be a good idea. But many people have worked harder and delivered more than we ever thought possible, and more than they did in the office. Now, again, there are exceptions to every statement. And I think a lot of leaders have discovered that view of I need you in front of me is outdated. Now, there is value in the informal conversations that happen, and I think much of that we will be able to replace with some either hybrid and or what people are doing now with Microsoft Teams and other Slack platforms, that they're finding that they can, quote, pop in. It's just electronically rather than in person, and we will develop new habits and new approaches. And the flip to that is we also now have access to workforce that we didn't have. I may have someone on my team, and in fact I do have team members from around the world. They're not going to relocate to live in Columbus, Ohio.
Right. Exactly.
It is the remote capability that allows me to access absolute top talent, and for people who also work with part-time team members that wouldn't have been possible if they were required in the office. So that can be anything from people taking care of aging parents, people taking care of young kids, people who have physical disabilities. The world has now opened up to expand the potential workforce for people who didn't have access before. Pros and cons to every situation. I think for companies and leaders who are creative, we're going to find ways around the limitations, and we will offset those by benefits that we didn't have when we had to be full-time in person.
Right. And then, when you think about having the opportunity to, like I said, to leverage, to bring on people that you would not have been able to do because it financially wouldn't have been either conducive or necessary, because that cost would have been tremendous to get somebody from overseas to move, like you said, to Ohio, and then, for whatever amount of time. And then, so you obviously, you want to have the best, but you also had to think about all those things prior, where today we do have that flexibility. And I think that insight is important. So I want to kind of backtrack just a little bit, because I want to talk more about you, Maureen, personally, about how you actually got into what you do. Obviously, you didn't have a business. You did work in other businesses prior, but talk a little bit about your journey and what really was the interest of how you enjoy helping others get to where they're at.
So, especially as a leadership consultant, I should say I had a plan and I followed the plan, but that's really not true. There is a lot of, I think, paying attention to the signs and to our inner guidance. So I picked a college, at 17, like all kids do, or many kids do, based on the boy-girl ratio, and based on and I was going to go into engineering because I thought it was a successful path forward for me to make a living. I got to the school I chose. One of my first classes was economics. Now, I'm a math person, so economics made sense to me. We could plot the world by graphs and numbers and equations. And isn't that an attractive way to live life? That there's limited uncertainty and people are rational.
Mm-hmm.
So this seemed like a really good profession for me. So I graduated with an economics degree. I took a job in finance.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply.
If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge. From worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
A few years in, I had changed jobs multiple times, and I went to a career counselor who said finance was not the best path for me. I wanted to go into law or sales or become a therapist. And the career counselor said no to all three of those for various reasons.
Wow.
What she did say was consulting, teaching, or broadcast news. So I ended up consulting, and again, this all sounds so rational and logical. The reality was I was in a finance department. One of my old bosses was in town for a visit, and all of us went out drinking. And he happened to be in consulting, and he connected me to somebody, and I got a consulting job. Mm-hmm. And then I left that role, and I was on an airplane sitting next to somebody, and that I got my next job from the guy I was sitting next to on the plane. That happened twice.
Wow.
Right. So this is pre-monster.com, but things unfolded in ways that I couldn't have anticipated, mm-hmm. that just worked. And so consulting, I got the first consulting job. I was there for 8 years. Second consulting job was the airplane. Third consulting job was the airplane. I left in 2001 and, had this question of what next. Mm-hmm. My accountant introduced me to a university professor because I wanted to teach. So remember consulting, teaching, and broadcast news.
Right.
So I wanted to teach part-time, and I happened to walk into his office, and he said, it's summertime. I don't want to teach this summer class. Will you teach economics over the summer? So I got my first teaching job because I walked in when somebody didn't want to do something, and I was happy to do it. So again, the theme kind of, if we're paying attention, mm-hmm. and if we're willing to take opportunities when they present themselves, mm-hmm. and turn the things that seem like a misfortune,
right.
like the 2001 Enron collapse. I'm in the utilities industry. Mm-hmm. That turned into the opportunity to teach. And then I ended up teaching in an MBA program, one of the first online MBA classes probably ever. That was in 2002.
Wow.
Now we're talking about doing things online, but that was early in that space. Mm-hmm. So I was able to travel as a consultant and teach online. So again, and I went in to talk to someone at the university, and he basically said, hey, somebody wanted me to do this consulting gig and I couldn't do it. Can you? So that was my first consulting project, being self-employed.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And like I said, I didn't know where I wanted to be, and that project was a significant project and really let me both teach and consult and consider that I liked doing the work as a small business, as an entrepreneur,
mm-hmm.
compared to working for a large firm. And I'll also say I couldn't have done this had I not worked for a couple of really good large firms
mm-hmm.
that trained me well.
Right. But the thing I love about what you're saying is that you've taken every opportunity that was put in front of you, even if it wasn't aligned originally what you wanted to do. You never really said no. You just said, you know what, here's an opportunity, I'm going to take it. And it worked. And, even after that counseling session, I'm sure that you thought about things, but, a lot of times you hear people say certain things and then you're like, no, I'm going to go this direction anyway. But everything that she told you to do or that you were counseled on, you have actually done. So that's incredible.
Let me add
Go ahead.
Oh, so the third one,
mm-hmm.
consulting, teaching, broadcast news. So I never did end up being a news broadcaster. But I got approached by an online radio station,
mm-hmm.
and they asked me to do a pilot 12 shows, which I also said yes to, thinking, no one will listen to me. I have nothing to say. And who's going to be on my show as a guest?
Right.
My 12 friends.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I live in a basement and have no friends, but I was like, let me try this for 12. But,
mm-hmm.
5 years later,
right.
I'm now on NPR, at least on their podcast NPR.
Right.
And so here, it's not broadcast news, but it's
broadcasting.
Leadership.
Mm-hmm. And leadership, yeah.
And I just uploaded my publisher uploaded my 10th book to Amazon today.
Wow.
So
congratulations.
Thank you. And someone asked me to write a column, of all things, a humor column, which is not me. And I got fired from my free writing job. So I never imagined writing a book, nor did I think 10 books and
mm-hmm.
all award-winning,
mm-hmm.
International Book Award winners. So, for people who are saying, that's her, not me,
mm-hmm.
I never imagined any of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It just was beyond what I could have envisioned or thought possible with my skills.
Right. But it's amazing. Like I said, in reality, you have pretty much hit everything that, like I said, you never thought about doing and most people would have never thought about doing, but it is a reality that you can do whatever you set your mind to, and just saying yes. And that even if the opportunity only lasted a few months, it was an opportunity, but your opportunities turn into years. And then, like you said, now here you've been a part of the podcast show that you never thought was going to be around, but for those 12 people. And then now you go above and beyond that and you focus on innovative leadership. So I want to dive into that. Tell my listeners what innovative leadership is about.
So if you think about leaders you've worked with, or if you are a leader, people come into a company, and most of the folks I work with are incredibly dedicated and they work crazy hours.
Mm-hmm.
So we're already overworked. We're seeing a rate of change that we've never seen in human history, and most of us secretly wonder how we're ever going to keep up. And so leaders often innovate the stuff they do. So if you're in a technology industry, you're just keeping up with technology and trying to create things that are ahead of your competitors. If you're in medicine, you're trying to keep up with new practices and do research to solve the biggest challenges in your field. Most leaders, in my experience, are not updating how they think about the role of leadership
mm-hmm.
like they think about updating the other parts of their business.
Mm-hmm.
And so they end up being outdated. So think about if you didn't update your smartphone for 3 years, it probably
right.
would just stop working. At least mine seems to stop working at some predetermined date.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, right? Right.
And same thing with the software. So the algorithms in old software are just outdated. They don't do as much. Well, the same is true if our thinking algorithms, our mindsets, are outdated. And so if you are leading people the way you led people in 1985, you are probably doing things that don't make sense. And let me give an example of that. In my first leadership role, I was with a consulting firm, and our accountants were doing audits, so contract audits. And my boss, part of my job was to make sure people were working hard. So if you talked for more than 5 minutes, I was supposed to tell you to stop talking. Now, many of the conversations were about, I'm facing a challenge with this audit, help me figure it out. They weren't just talking about sports or something. So I was the time police of all things. Now we know that if you don't have a best friend at work, according to the Gallup research, you have a chance of being fully engaged of like 8%. So the thing I was doing that back then, when you didn't have personal lives at work, you kept that at home. Now we know that approach to leadership was ineffective. And as we learn more about neuroscience and how do we build neural pathways and how do people learn and all of this stuff, how we lead continues to evolve. Who we looked at in the past to be our most effective leaders are often in this current ecosystem not as effective. They're well-intended, they're ethical, they're all that stuff, but the complexity of their thinking may not be the same. Their emotional intelligence may not be the same. I mean, think about command and control with no emotional intelligence during the COVID pandemic. Not helpful.
Yep, they wouldn't be able to survive.
Yeah. I heard the commandant of the Marine Corps, recently retired commandant, talk about one of the most important skills for Marines during wartime is empathy. Wasn't what I would have expected, but
people are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply.
As we deal with humans in times of difficulty, empathy is one of the most important skills. And yet we have not often built leaders with those emotionally intelligent skills. We build them with analytically intelligent skills.
Right. I agree with that. I definitely agree with that, because the world is telling you got to be one way when you're a leader and you own something. People look up to you a certain way, but they don't also realize that we're human. And so that humanity has got to be a part of who your business is, because I don't see businesses today, being able to survive in that attitude of awareness of, well, I just don't care. Well, that's not true, because you have to care, because you need people in order to be a successful business. And so, I agree with that. That's something that in business, it consistently needs to change, and you have to be aware of those things. So when you are working with your clientele in that perspective, and you do find somebody who's very difficult like that, or has used to, maybe as a good example, somebody's been in the military for many, many years, and their whole persona is just based on, well, you do what I say. How do you get them to change?
Actually, the military does a brilliant job of getting leaders to develop. So I want to just acknowledge that they're not what we see on TV is not often what we see in them in person.
Mm-hmm.
And still the question is, what do we do with people who are stuck in that command and control, micromanage, I don't trust my people?
Mm-hmm.
There are a few things. We put them in disorienting situations and push the growth.
Mm-hmm.
We add coaching to that situation. We send them to training and development. We get them mentors. And often that combination of activities works.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, in many cases, and one of the things I do is assess. So I work with a lot of engineers and physicians and super smart people back in our analytical bucket. And so back to the idea that we haven't been taught what leadership is in many cases, or how we define it now is different. These are people who have the capacity to change. And so it's explaining what it is, giving good examples, helping them recognize both their strengths and their deficiencies. And for many of them, if you can make it through med school or law school or engineering school, you can learn these things. It's just changing myself is different than solving an equation or doing a surgery. And so it is building those different muscles if they think they want to. And the truth is, not everyone wants to or needs to. They just shouldn't be leading large, complex organizations full of people.
Right.
They can have strategic roles. They can have subject matter expert roles. They can be brilliant contributors that don't necessarily lead people.
And that's a good, interesting concept, because I have never heard people actually someone put it that way, where, they're good at what they do, but they just don't need to be telling people exactly what to be around a lot of people, and they can use their expertise in a different way. Because you're right, not everybody's meant to be a leader, quote unquote. And that doesn't mean that you can't lead or you're not intelligent, but there's just some people who just don't have the tenacity to work with other and human beings per se. So yeah, I definitely like that. And how you explain that. And so I do want to dive in a little bit about your books, because you just told me a few minutes ago that you just uploaded book number 10. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your book?
So this one is Innovative Leadership for Healthcare. And so my COVID project, because we weren't doing as much leadership development as people were trying to navigate staying alive in their businesses. And I had the wonderful opportunity of working with some healthcare workers who were case studies for this book. And so it describes up front, and we partnered with the Uniformed Services University and a couple of folks in their leader development field who also happen to be brilliant practitioners of medicine and working with people with addiction and neuroscience. And so a very robust focus in medicine, healthcare, and leadership. And my focus being specifically leadership, but I've also been working with physicians and researchers for about a decade in the healthcare field. So we combined our frameworks. So the beginning of the book gives the leadership frameworks, and then the rest of the book, and this is really important to me, that we don't just write about what it is that people can memorize. We want to create a path for people to become it. So otherwise we can win trivia tests, we can bore people at cocktail parties talking about leadership. But I'm writing these books to help leaders actually implement different ways of leading, which means they have to change themselves. They have to evolve and grow. And so it's a workbook with case studies about, one is actually a head and neck radiation oncologist, so a guy working with brain tumors and things. And then the other is a brilliant nurse practitioner who's just finished her doctorate, and she is both teaching and working as an NP. So we wanted to get both the nurse and the physician perspective. They're both mid-career, He is a little later than her, but we wanted to get something that was useful for everything from I'm in med school, I'm a resident, I'm a fellow, through I'm leading a practice, and making it accessible and practical. So we do have some theory, because I think it needs to be grounded in theory. And we wanted to make it useful. So if you run a practice, you can do the variation of a book club, and people do the exercises and share them together. And they talk about, what do we want our leadership culture to be? What systems do we need to put in place to make sure that culture emerges? How do we recognize, what does behaviors look like? What is the mindset behind those behaviors? And what do we want our
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply.
Our employees and our clients to experience when they walk through the front door in the morning. And how do we make that possible? And it is all about not only what we do, but who we are.
Right.
So we start with vision and values. What do you value? And how do you behave to show that?
Well, book sounds like it is going to be another award-winning book. So
Let us hope.
Well, I'm just putting it out there for you, Maureen, so I'm sure you'll be fine.
Thank you. What I wanted to be is incredibly helpful to the people who have worked so incredibly hard and sacrificed a lot to show up at work during a pandemic, being afraid every day of exposing their families.
Right.
These are folks who were sequestering in their homes or hotels so that they could continue to serve patients and didn't often have the support of the physical contact with their families. I'm sure they were supported by, but when you can't hug your kids at night because you've been with patients during the day, and that's a tough commitment.
Yes. Yeah, it is. Like you said, it's one thing to be committed, sitting in front of a computer all day for 10, 12 hours a day, but it's a huge difference when you're not able to be around the people that you love every day because of the commitment that you have made, and for some people they're saying in the back of their mind, well, that's their job. But at the end of the day, they could have lost their life doing their job to make sure that we could live every day. So I definitely applaud you for that book, and looking forward to learning more about it and see if it does become another award-winning book. And so could you tell the listeners where almost all your books can be purchased from?
Amazon. So this one is not yet uploaded, but by the time people listen, hopefully it will be. So the standard Amazon.com. I think we're on Barnes & Noble and through other booksellers as well.
Okay. Yeah, so you have 10 books, so I'm sure that we'll be able to find you, so we won't go through all of them this evening, but I always love talking to other authors because, having the voice and realizing how important our voice is and sharing the information that we learned with others is an incredible feat to do. And so, once you start writing, like I said, you never wanted to write, but then here you've done more writing than you possibly could have ever imagined. And I think most of us authors are kind of like that. As like, this was not my plan, but now I'm doing it. So it's a good thing to do, and it's a blessing for others, to learn from the things that you have researched and the people you're working with, and giving them the information they need to have that'll be valuable for them in their lives. But I have a couple more questions before we end this evening. Before, I'm sure you get more people who ask you what it's like to be in business. What good advice would you give when it comes to starting a new business?
Have a good plan. I know, you've heard very clearly from me, I didn't follow my plans necessarily, but you need to make sure you have target customers. You need to know where the money's going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have enough financial security. So you may start a company while you're still working. I think things always cost more. It takes longer to collect the income. We always hit roadblocks. So make sure you are financially stable. What's heartbreaking to me is to see people put their houses on the line and lose them because the market wasn't what we anticipated. Coming out of a pandemic, a lot of us saw it wasn't what we anticipated, and it was a lot worse. So make sure you have the financial house in order, or start while you're working another job. And then the other is know how to sell, or have a partner who can sell, or a service that can help you sell. Make sure that you have a pathway to cash. So it's one thing to love what you do. It's another to make a living doing what you do and not be constantly worried about, can I pay the bills this month? And can I pay the people that work for me? And can I pay myself?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I know that sounds a little not inspirational, but the just the tactical reality of it is wonderful to be passionate about what you do. Make sure that the thing you are passionate about before you dive full-time into it will also support you. Otherwise, you can be passionate and do it part-time. I interviewed someone recently who donates a lot of money to causes, and he said, and I argued with this initially, he said, I'm not passionate about what I'm in business for. But the thing I'm passionate about, if I did that, I wouldn't make much money and I wouldn't make as much impact. I do this other thing that I'm good at. I make a lot of money and I donate a lot of money to the things I'm really passionate about.
Wow.
So I thought that was interesting. Isn't that great?
It is. It's a great concept, and it's a great topic, because I was sitting here listening to what you were saying about, it's one thing to love what you do, but if you can't make any money and you don't know how, find that person that you can connect with or be a part of the business that can help you strategize and get that money in, and so you can focus on what you feel you're good with. And you don't hear a lot of people say that, because, as owners, we are also focusing, well, it's mine, it's my baby. This is what I want to do. And this is how I do that. But like I said, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you're passionate about if you're just literally just doing this just to be doing it, and you're not making the income. You can't pay your bills, and it's okay if you're only doing it part-time, as long as you are doing exactly what you want to do, and it has some feedback, you're getting your return on investment per se. So I definitely like that argument that you had with your guest, because he's right to some degree, that it's not always about what you're passionate about, but it is definitely about how do you make the income so that you can do those other things to use your passion in a different way if you need to. Very smart.
I've watched friends and colleagues, brilliant ones, not mediocre ones, fail at businesses for all kinds of reasons. But the end of the day is they lose their houses, they lose their retirement funds, and then they're, mid to late career with limited resources and fewer options, because you don't recover from this when you're starting from bankrupt at 50.
Right.
So that's the reason I say be clear about the finances and don't put your house on the line. If you can't do it without losing your house, you're in the wrong business. And people may push back on that, but
Well, you've been
especially
an
if you
expert
have
at
a
this.
family counting on you.
Exactly. But, you're expert in your field too. You've been doing this for a long time. So I wouldn't just be like, oh, she doesn't know what she's saying. So you obviously know what you're talking about.
Well, people will make their own decisions, and nothing is absolute.
Right.
But strong recommendation: don't put your future at. Take calculated risks.
Absolutely. Well, I couldn't have said that better myself, and that's why I always have the experts on my show. But before we go, Maureen, could you please tell our listeners how they can reach out to you or learn more about the Innovative Leadership Institute?
Sure. So go to our website, innovativeleadershipinstitute.com. We do a weekly blog, and I bring in experts because I only know so much. And like you, Kimberly, I get to interact with people who are brilliant in their field, and part of what I do is curate that. So thank you for what you're doing. You can follow me on LinkedIn. We also have a newsletter there. And we have a ton of resources for free on the website. My purpose is to help elevate the quality of leaders around the world. And a lot of leaders do brilliant work. They can't afford a coach, or they can't take the time to get one. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make a lot of resources available so that they can continue to learn and grow and contribute in the ways they find most impactful without us charging them.
Wow. Yeah, and that is awesome, because that's something, that you brought, when you brought that up, I talk about a lot with a lot of the clients and people I'm connected to. Not everybody who's coming in business can afford every little thing that they're doing. So they feel like sometimes they have to pick and choose so they can be successful. And sometimes it's unfair, because when we all get started, we all depend on somebody or something. And so, I'm always trying to connect with people who are willing to provide good resources that are valuable and important, so that individuals who are aspiring to be an entrepreneur or are already entrepreneurs can still excel without having to go broke. So I really, truly thank you and appreciate that your company and your organization, your business provides that for anyone who's looking to elevate in leadership. So, and to do well in their business, regardless what that business may be. So I would thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we do with our listeners. And thank you for being such a brilliant host.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I thank you for coming on tonight with me. Do you have any last words that you would like to share with the listeners?
I do. Thank you for asking that. During this time where things are changing so much, we all get opportunities we hadn't anticipated. And like we talked about, step up, step in, take the risk, take a calculated risk, but take the risk, because each of us has unique skills that the world needs right now. We need people who are compassionate and gifted and talented in their own ways to pull together to navigate the challenges we're facing, because people are suffering. And the more we pull together, the better communities we'll have.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I couldn't say anything that you said better, because that was a phenomenal way to end our show this evening. And, again, I thank you for coming on, and I hope that everyone who is listening tonight is actually learning something. And if you didn't listen to the live, you can always go back and listen to the replay as often as you want, because I'm telling you, Maureen just dropped some major golden nuggets on the show this evening. So please take the time to listen to tonight's show. And of course, it always leads me to ask my listeners, what do you wish you existed for you in 2021 or anytime? It's time for you to sit back and reevaluate your goals. And if you're ready to have that talk, a real talk, reach out to me at Kimberly, WSBILC@gmail.com. And let's talk about your vision. Let's talk about whether you may want to leave a legacy by writing a book or starting a podcast show where you can share your expertise with many others that need that experience that you have and the help. And of course, if you'd like to have more of WSBI, additional podcast show, or do some free virtual live Q&A sessions with some of our favorite entrepreneurs, we are doing a campaign so that we can provide more resources for success. So you're more than welcome to donate to our campaign at www.wsbilc.com. And as well, Again, I'd like to thank you all for listening to tonight's show. We'll be back next week with more amazing guests. Be sure to follow us on iHeartRadio or download our mobile app on Google Play or wherever you listen to your podcast. But until then, enjoy the rest of your evening and good night.
Good night, everyone. We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply. People are driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. The hiring process can be slow and overwhelming. Simplify hiring with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform. With over 350 million global monthly visitors according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. That's Indeed.com/PODKATZ13. Terms and conditions apply.